Alright guys, welcome to part 2 of my VNL preview. If you guys missed the first part, probably should watch that first. I'll link it up here. But basically, I'm previewing what's going on in VNL 2021 breaking down every team, the situations of their players over the past couple years since the last international tournament. Hopefully catch you guys up on what has been going on in the world of volleyball. So I went over the first 8 teams in part 1. So now it's time for the next 8 in part 2, starting with
let the celebrations begin.
My last team in tier 4, number 8, is Italy. And some of you guys may be surprised. Italy, silver medal, 2016 Olympics, Zaitsev, Wantarena, Gianelli, really good team. However, I don't think all those guys will join the team for the VNL. As of the recording, they still haven't released the final roster, but I would think that only one of the 3 of Gianelli, Zaitsev, Wantarena will go to the bubble. Maybe because they're at home in Italy, more guys will come, but given the way that Italy's built their rosters in the past, I kind of doubt it. And without those guys, especially Zaitsev, the talent level drops off a huge amount after the starters. So that's why I have them a little lower. And one of the young guys I'm most excited to see is Alessandro Micheletto, who started on one of the best teams in volleyball in the Super Finals for Trentino at only 19 years old. He's this unicorn player, a 7-footer that can pass incredibly well at a young age. Still isn't there with the offense and serving and some of the other skills, but the sky is the limit for Micheletto, and I would maybe even consider him for the second outside hitter on the Olympic roster for Italy. Funnily enough, Italy, even though they're hosting it, are the one team that really decided to send kind of their bench squad and prospects and that kind of player. So because for me, Italy is a team that really lacks depth. If I were to update these rankings, Italy would probably be, I would say, last place in this team with their current lineup. All right, now time for tier 3 teams that I think have a good shot at making that final 6 tournament. And if things go their way, could even get a medal and potentially win the whole thing. If you told me my team here, Serbia, was the winner of VNL, wouldn't be that surprised. Serbia is interesting because they don't have the Olympics this summer, which pretty much all the teams in this top tier do. So we'll see if they decide to focus a little more on VNL, try and win that money. They won in the last Olympic cycle in 2016, so there's a precedent. Those of you who've been following club volleyball this year know that Alexander Atanasejevic was injured pretty much the entire year, only got healthy at the end. So we'll see if he's ready to play for Serbia. But on the other hand, Drazen Lubric, a perpetually underrated player, had a fantastic season for Novosibirsk in Russia, one of the leading scorers and servers in the incredibly competitive Russian league. So could see either one of those guys there. We've seen Lubric play major international tournaments in the past. Kovacevic, we haven't seen almost ever. He played in China this year, actually won the tournament with Beijing and was definitely their leading player, along with another player coming up soon, Maruf. And then, of course, you have some of the best middle blockers in the world, like Sreko Lizinac, Marko Podroshanin. But the question, I think, with Serbia is, like, setter libero are very much not the same tier as the other guys on this team. Nikola Jovovic had to play in France this year, and France is a great league, but I don't think you see guys like Ben Taniudi, Micah Christensen, and Bruno playing in French Ligue A anytime soon. Next up is my highest Asian team, the 2019 VNL Surprise team, qualified for the final 6, Iran. And Iran for me is one of the most interesting teams to follow, because they actually, compared to the other Asian countries, do have quite a few of their players playing overseas. We've got to see guys like Milada Badapor, Sayed Musavi, and Maruf all play in top leagues around the world and hold their own. These guys are extremely talented. The question for me with Iran is of age, because they have Maruf, like one of the top setters in the world, but he is 35, and yes, setters can play a bit longer, but he's definitely declining in terms of athleticism. At the same time, they have this young generation that won the U21 2019 World Championships, which is a huge deal. Pretty much every country that's won that tournament, their players go on to have like a golden generation. It's a big tournament to win. But the issue is, does the timing line up between Maruf and Musavi and Badapor and these older guys and the young generation coming up? We'll see. Part of me feels like those young guys aren't quite ready to put Iran in a medal contender status just yet. So Serbia and Iran I had in tier 3, and now onto my tier 2. A team that has moved around more so than probably any other team in my rankings, and that's USA. I did have them higher, however, they got some absolutely heartbreaking, devastating news. that Aaron Russell would have season-ending hip surgery, which would put him out for the VNL and the Olympics, which is really too bad. It looked like the stars were aligning correctly for an injury-plagued USA team, and they were going to be a serious contender for Olympic gold this year. Without Aaron Russell, though, he's one of the top outside hitters in the world. Missing him is going to be huge. There's some interesting lineup decisions for Coach Spera now. Do you move Matt Anderson to the outside hitter position, which he plays in club, and start Ben Patch, who had a great season in Berlin at opposite? Or do you bring in someone like a TJ DeFalco or Thomas Jaski, or even Garrett to play beside Taylor Sander? In my opinion, I think you should leave Matt Anderson on the right side, bring in Thomas Jaski to start next to Taylor Sander. He had a fairly good season playing in Verona, was more efficient than TJ DeFalco. And, you know, Garrett, fantastic player, elite player, played really well for Team USA in the past, but, you know, I think if you look through the starters of the top teams, he'd probably be the least talented starter. I really do hope the USA does well this summer, though. I feel like this is the closing window for this team with guys like David Smith, Max Holt, Matt Anderson, all in their mid-30s. It's going to be really tough to keep those guys at the same level for another Olympic cycle, and I don't see a lot of guys coming up through the ranks to replace them. At number 4, I have a team that will forever be the reigning World League champion because the tournament was discontinued, and that is France. Obviously, you guys probably know most of the French players. They're all scattered playing on the top teams in the world, but they seem to have this curse where they don't maybe play as well as you would expect in big international tournaments.
France are falling apart! Engepath is head firmly looking at the floor!
However, I do see them playing well at this VNL. I think they're kind of like a dark horse contender for medals both here and at the Olympics. They have some interesting roster decisions to make, though. Of course, at outside hitter, you have Irvin Engepet, who, in my opinion, is still a lock, even though maybe not the best season with Kazan. But then there's a few ways you could go with the second position. Trevor Clevenot, extremely crafty, smart, talented player. You have Thibaut Roussard, who is one of the leading scorers in Italy this year and had a fantastic season with Vibo Valencia, finishing way higher than people expected. You have Yassine Louati, who after being kind of left off this French national team the last few years has really had a good club run, winning the Polish league with the Ostrzejpy Węgiel. For me, it comes down to those three guys. You may be surprised that Tilly and Liniel didn't factor in here, but Tilly had a very tough season, hitting low efficiencies with the last place Cisterna in Italy, and Julian Liniel has not played volleyball professionally in the past year. So that's a tough one for France, but they have plenty of talent at the outside hitter position. Personally, I would go with Irvin Engepet, Grebennikov is locks. Ben Taniuti starting and trying to build around his playing style like they did in Zaxa. Then Chinanez, Le Goff, Patry. And for my second outside hitter, I would probably go with Trevor Clevenot. France for sure has the talent to win this tournament, but part of me thinks that the prime time for this group of players, their window was probably 3 or 4 years ago. We'll see this summer. Now my tier 1 top 3, I could see any of these 3 teams winning the tournament. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Brazil. And I have no idea what Brazil is thinking this summer. You have extremely talented guys, a lot of tough lineup decisions. I mean, like setter, you have Bruno, but you have Cachopa, who's, you know, playing really well as well. At outside hitter, you have Mauricio Borges, who just won MVP of the Brazilian League. But you also have Ricardo Lucarelli, who played in Italy last season. Outside hitter Enrique Honorato, who's been part of Brazilian's youth system for a little while now. Had the most aces in Brazil this year, and you know, it's pretty interesting, kind of undersized, but skilled and hard-serving player, fun to watch. You have Yuandi Leal, who had one of his best seasons ever with Lube. You have Douglas Souza. There's a lot of good guys there, and the same goes for pretty much every position. So I'm interested to see how Brazil goes, but even with their second lineup, I still think I would put them around this level. At number 2, we have one of the most talked about teams in volleyball right now, and that's Poland. Obviously, being the reigning world champions puts them in a high tier, but we did see them bring a kind of backup lineup to the 2019 VNL. However, they still got bronze in that tournament, despite not bringing like any of their starters. So that's why I'm confident putting them a bit higher in this tournament, because looking at their bench, you have guys like Kamil Semeniuk, you have guys like Jakub Kołanowski, you have guys like Damian Wojciech, who might not even crack the starting lineup in an Olympic game, but are still like some of the best players in the world at their position. For me, the 2 biggest questions for Poland for this summer is 1, egos. A lot of really talented, really well-paid really big name players on the team: Bartosz Kurek, Michał Kubiak, Wilfredo Leon, Pavel Zatorsky. You know, all these guys are great, and I'm sure they'll get along, but it is a lot of mouths to feed, and probably like 15 guys who you can make an argument to start on the national team. The player to watch for Poland, you know, if you've been living under a rock the past year and you haven't heard of Kamil Semeniuk, the outside hitter playing for Zaksa Kędzierzyn-Koźle, was one of the most integral pieces in their super finals win. But Poland is just so deep at outside hitter. I mean, Wilfredo Leon, Michał Kubiak, Aleksander Śliwka, Bartosz Bednarz, like those are maybe 4 of the top 15 outside hitters in the world. And finally, my number 1 team, the team that I think will three-peat in the VNL and remain the only VNL champions, is Russia. And we saw in 2019 they can win it without their top lineup, without Mazursky, without Mikhailov. And if you guys have watched or listened to my podcast, you know probably one of the players that I think improved their stock the most out of anyone this year is the setter Pavel Pankov, who was the MVP of the Russian league, both my pick and the league's pick, and led Dynamo Moscow to a championship. In my opinion, he should for sure be the starter for VNL and the Olympics, for sure over guys like Bukko, over guys like Kobzar, over guys like Grankin. And this is great because one of Russia's only weaknesses was not having that top-tier elite setter the past few years. So really the only question left for Russia is the libero position. They have a really exciting young prospect, Ilya Fedorov, playing on Zenit Kazan. However, he's still only 18 years old, a little young for a top libero to be getting playing time. So at the moment, they don't really have that top tier libero, and especially for a team that is not the best in reception, having that would improve their odds greatly. But for all of our sakes, I'm kind of glad they don't have a top tier libero to give everyone else a chance. They still have a really good team, stacked at every position. I think they'll three-peat. I see them as VNL 21 champions, but I could see anyone from tier 1, tier 2, or maybe even tier 3, an Iran or Serbia win would be kind of exciting. But overall, I'm just really excited to watch international volleyball again. It's been way too long since I've seen Team Canada played, and for the teams that didn't play the Olympic qualifiers, it's been even longer. And remember, subscribe to this channel and check out my podcast if you guys want more updates as the tournament goes on, and of course, later on in the summer where we get to the real juicy part, which is the Olympics. And remember, you can watch the tournament on volleyballworld.tv, the FIVB streaming platform. I'm personally a huge fan. Just remember to check your geo-blocking restrictions before you buy that, because I know a few people do get burned. But I'm excited to watch this all with you guys, and I hope you guys have a great week.